What's happening? Welcome in the Matt Bernier Show on DRF TV, live.drf.com, livestream.com, the Daily Racing Forms Twitter handle, that would be at DRF Inside Post, as well as the Daily Racing Forms Facebook page. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. This is the recap edition of the Matt Bernier Show, going back and taking a look at the weekend of racing from March the 24th, big day of racing at the fairgrounds, and then you had some good stuff going on at Santa Anita, some other stakes races sort of mixed in all around the place, and then you also had a couple of good races coming up on Sunday afternoon on March the 25th that we'll dive into as well. If you listen to this thing in the podcast version, you have YouTube, iTunes, SoundCloud, and video.drf.com. Let's dive right into it. Let's talk about the Louisiana Derby, $1 million on the line, a grade 2, 3-year-olds going 1 1/8. This was the field. You had 10 signed on in here. This was an interesting race. Ultimately, favoritism landed on Todd Pletcher's Noble Indy. Lightly raced, only making his 4th lifetime start. Blinkers were going on for the first time, trying to sharpen him up a little bit. And guess what? They did the trick, as we can see here from the results. Noble Indy gets the job done. He wins the Louisiana Derby, pays $7.40 on top. The number 8 Lone Sailor runs second, $7.80 to place. The number 9 My Boy Jack runs third, $3.20 to show. The $1 exacta comes back $37 even. The 50-cent trifecta, 289, comes back $95.35, and the 10-cent superfecta comes back $137.16. Noble Indy is 3 of 4 lifetime. He has never been out of the money. He has over $691,000 in career earnings, trained by Todd Pletcher, owned by Windstar Farm, LLC, and Rapoli Stable, bred by Windstar Farm, LLC, in the state of Kentucky. Ridden to victory by John Velasquez. The pedigree is at the bottom of the page. He is by Take Charge Indy, out of a storm boot mare named Noble Maz. A 95 buyer speed figure, a 118 time form U.S. rating for Noble Indy winning this race. Let's talk a little bit about how the race itself was run. Noble Indy goes out there, presses the fast fraction set by the 140 to 1 shot stretch out sprinter, maiden anyway. All things considered, he was a little bit on the keen side. Timeform US has that half-mile split color-coded as red for fast. And you look at the fractions at face value, 22 and 4, 46 and 3, 11 and 2 for 3/4. I agree with that. I think it was a pretty legitimate pace, and I think he did a lot of running. Now, on the far turn, he's out there cruising. He's put away the cheap speed that stretched out. Now he's got to deal with Lone Sailor. Lone Sailor got a little bit of a shuffle from that speed horse that was faltering, but he comes with a serious, significant bid, looms up, actually takes the lead. And not by a little bit, by a pretty significant margin. He put a full length and change on Noble Indy. Now, immediately, that made me kind of perk up because I liked Lone Sailor in this race, but he was the wise guy horse. A lot of people did. The problem I had with that all of a sudden became, now you see My Boy Jack on the far outside, who we know what he's capable of. He has a nice, big, late kick. He has a big finish. Kent DeSormo took him all the way off the pace. He knew things were heating up in front of him, and you saw him like a flash come on in the far turn and way outside, 6-7 path, turning for home. He ultimately also passes Noble Indy. So now Noble Indy is third with 1/8 of a mile to go, and it looks like he's finishing up the track, and it's going to be a matter of those two horses, whether it's going to be Lone Sailor or it's going to be My Boy Jack. Ultimately, Noble Indy comes back on the inside and wins and prevails by a neck. My Boy Jack flattens out down the lane, and Lone Sailor, he tried, but he flattened out a little bit as well. I think the interesting thing to note, you hear John Velasquez after the race in the post-race interview talk about how he didn't see the horses to his outside, Noble Indy. But once he did, he re-engaged. And to back that up a little bit, I'm seeing a lot of people talk about how Lone Sailor hung and My Boy Jack, maybe he just moved a little bit too early or whatever the case may be. I think there's validity to what Velasquez is saying, that Noble Indy just didn't see those horses, because when you look at their final 1/8 of a mile, Noble Indy came home in 12 and 4, Lone Sailor came home in 13, and My Boy Jack came home in 12.95, so just shy of 13 seconds. So Noble Indy almost came home in 1/5 of a second faster than either one of those two horses, who theoretically, if you're just looking at the way the race was run, they're supposed to be finishing faster than Noble Indy is. I really think Noble Indy may have just kind of, I don't want to say pulled himself up, but he didn't know that those horses were there, and we've seen it in the past. Horses re-engage. Think of a number of years ago to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile with Shanghai Bobby out at Santa Anita. He basically threw it into neutral, and Rosie Napravnik was all over him. It took a horse to come up to him and re-engage for Shanghai Bobby to go on with it. Keep in mind, Noble Indy is very lightly raced. This is only his 4th lifetime start. He moved up from the buyer standpoint, but I think a lot of people are just going to look at it and say, well, this can't be that good because Lone Sailor didn't do what he was supposed to do when it looked like he was just going to go with a full head of steam. And my boy Jack, okay, he had to come 15 wide, turning for home, and maybe that's why. I think there's more to Noble Indy than maybe it seems here. He earns 100 points. He's in the Kentucky Derby if all goes well, and it sounds like that's the plan for he as well as Lone Sailor. My boy Jack, they're going to have to wait and see if he's going to get in. He's at 32 points. I think it'll be enough, but it's going to be very, very tight. And Keith DeSormo has said that in a perfect world, they don't run him again before the Kentucky Derby. I think it was a good effort from Noble Indy. I really do. I think this was a marked step forward. Maybe from a buyer standpoint, it was only a 4-point improvement, but I think there were a lot of things that happened here. You saw he was a little bit keen. Velasquez talked about how he was a little bit eager early on, and he just kind of had to get him to relax a little bit. I think there is certainly scope for improvement from Noble Indy. Is he going to win the Kentucky Derby? I don't know. We've got to wait and see what happens over the next 2 weeks, where you have all the giant, and I should say 3 weeks if you include the Arkansas Derby. We've got to wait and see what happens here, but I think this is certainly an encouraging performance from this horse. Lightly raced, looks like he continues to improve. The blinkers certainly helped. Pletcher talked about cutting the blinkers back a little bit, so maybe we're not dealing with what we had down in Louisiana once we get to Churchill Downs. I think there's a lot to like. He's very, very interesting. If he can press the pace and go on with it and finish, this is an interesting horse come the first Saturday in May. Lone Sailor, I think he ran very well. I do wonder if there is much more improvement there. I think this was kind of what you got. Mile and an eighth, I don't know if a mile and a quarter works for him. My boy Jack, I've slowly but surely, I mean, I said it early on as a 2-year-old, and I said it before this race when we talked about it in the Stakes Preview, which you can find over on video.drf.com. And if you're checking this out on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Subscribe to the Daily Racing Forums channel. You get all of our videos, stakes previews, recaps, you name it. My boy Jack, I think, is going to be a turf horse down the line. And I think what you saw was that boom, that big turn of foot, that nice burst, but he just couldn't sustain it. I think all of a sudden that plays a heck of a lot better in a turf race where they're going 49 to the half and he's only 5 out of it as opposed to 15 out of it. And then you come with that big burst and you time it right. You get it done. He's a nice horse. He can run on dirt, certainly. I think he's better suited on the turf down the road. As for the rest of the field, Bravazzo, something seemed a little bit amiss going into the far, around the far turn. I have to wait and see again. Take a look at drf.com. You'll get all the sort of updates as well as live.drf.com from all of our reporters and our contributors about anything, the latest and greatest that comes out as far as Derby news is concerned. Snapper Sinclair, certainly a step backward. I think he, again, is better going shorter. All along, I felt like he might have been a one-turn mile kind of horse. And the rest of the field's kind of nondescript. I don't think there's a heck of a lot in there. The top 3, I think, are good. I think Noble Indy is, I don't know that I want to say I think he's the best of them all, because I think my boy Jack on turf could be the best when it's all said and done. But this was certainly a positive effort from Noble Indy. If you like this horse going into this race, you have to like him coming out of it. I think he did a lot of running. He gets the job done in the Louisiana Derby, a 95 buyer speed figure and a 118 time form U.S. rating. Counterpart to the Louisiana Derby, the 3-year-old fillies in the Fairgrounds Oaks, a mile and 16th on the main track. This was the field, 7 signed on. Favoritism landed on Classy Act, who projected to be the controlling speed. Javier Castellano had the mount. A horse that always takes money is Wonder Godot. She has some talent, but there are still questions about ultimately what surface is she best on. And then you had some other fresh faces, whether it is a horse like Eskimo Kisses coming in from Oaklawn Park on just a smashing victory, a low 90 buyer, but that was over a wet track. Did she really just adore that? Or is she coming into her own? And then you had some longer prices, and ultimately one of the longer prices got the job done, as we can see from the results. Chocolate Martini wins this race, $29.80 on top. The number 4 Eskimo Kisses rallies from the back of the pack, runs second, $5.20 to place. And the number 8 Wonder Godot, $2.40 to show, excuse me. The $1 exact, 9.4. Comes back $58.70. The 50-cent trifecta comes back $80.75. And the 10-cent superfecta 9481 comes back $25.15. Chocolate Martini is a 3-year-old filly. She is by Broken Vow out of a successful appeal mare named Nick's Appealing Lady. She's 3 of 7 lifetime, $278,636 in career earnings. She's owned by Double Door Racing, LLC, trained by Tom Amos. Bred by Savino A. Capilupi in Kentucky. Ridden to victory by Mitchell Merle. A 88 buyer speed figure and a 107 time form U.S. rating for Chocolate Martini. This was an interesting race because the pace was legitimate and you did have the breakout sort of controlling speed Classy Act. She went a little bit faster, I think, probably than ideal. The internal splits for time form color-coded red, meaning the pace was fast, the half mile and the three-quarter splits, and you just look at the fractions at face value, 23-1, 46-1, 11 flat for three-quarters. That is part of the reason that Classy Act actually earned the highest time form U.S. rating in the field with a 112. Eskimo Kisses and Chocolate Martini, they both took advantage of that coming from well off the pace. They earned 107s. Wonder Godot earns a 108, as well as She's a Julie, a 108 time form U.S. rating. In order of Beyer speed figures, Chocolate Martini, the 88, Eskimo Kisses, 87, Wonder Godot, 86, and Classy Act, an 85. When you look at the come-home times for these horses, Eskimo Kisses was finishing the best of them all, just missed out by a head behind Chocolate Martini. Came home in 31-4, as opposed to Chocolate Martini, who came home in 32-1. So about 2/5 of a second faster. I think that is significant if you're projecting these horses to possibly stretch out a little bit farther. You need that extra 16th to get out to the Kentucky Oaks distance. Kenny McPeak is saying Eskimo Kiss is possible for a race like the Ashland. If they don't go there, they should have enough points to get into the Kentucky Oaks. She's one that if that race does heat up and there is some legitimate pace signed on in there, you've got to look at her as a legitimate threat. Chocolate Martini, I think it was a great ride from Mitchell Murrill. I think Tom Amos has done a very, very good job. Remember, this filly was claimed for about $15,000 not too long ago. Now she's a graded stakes winner. I kind of feel like this was the time. You could have gotten her at a good number. You're going to be able to get her at a good number again going forward. If she runs in the Kentucky Oaks, she'll be a big number there as well. But at the same time, I just kind of feel like circumstances, maybe a little bit of a suspect field. She had it all work for her here. I don't know that I would want to be on her going forward, or at least going into the Kentucky Oaks. Wonder Godot, I said before during the stakes preview, I'll say it again. I don't think she's a dirt horse, but I think she's every bit as talented, if not more so, than the rest of these girls. Get her back on synthetic or turf. Either one, I don't care, but just get her off the dirt. I think she's shown that she's just not as effective on the dirt at this point in her career, and maybe she never will be. That's fine. We know that she's really, really good when she's on synth or turf. I want her back to one of those surfaces, and I won't touch her until she goes back to one of those surfaces. Classy Act is sneaky in here because that pace was fast. I'm not suggesting she's sneaky for a race like the Kentucky Oaks, but we even had someone on Twitter reach out to us talking about how there's a possibility maybe she's kind of an 8 bells filly, where on this turn back after setting a hot pace, if she can sit a little bit, which she has done in the past, all of a sudden that turn back in distance, we've seen it be so effective in the past, going from a mile and 16th or 2 turns in general, turning back to 7/8 of a mile. Classy Act, sneaky. I would just suggest throwing her maybe in your DRF horse watch to wait and see for where she shows up next. I wouldn't want her at a distance like this, but possibly on a turn back, she could be an interesting one. Chocolate Martini, right place at the right time, great training job, great ride. She gets the job done in the Fairgrounds Oaks, 88 Beyer, 107 time form U.S. rating. Major turf event at the Fairgrounds on Saturday was the Muniz Memorial Handicap. This was the field of 11 signed on, going about 1 1/8 on the turf course. This was a fascinating race because you had some imports coming in that figured to be bet, whether it was Lucullen or Forge or even a horse like Ring Weekend, who we know he's just an old hard hitter. He shows up with his runs. They were going to be taking on the local horses, the Synchronies, the Mr. Misunderstoods, even the Arklows of the world. So it was going to be a matter of, do you like the local form or do you like the horses shipping in from out of town? This ultimately turned into a race where the local horses, with the local sort of recency and familiarity with how the turf course is playing and the connections, they get the job done as Synchrony ultimately wins the Muniz Memorial Handicap, pays $8 on top. The number 4 Arklow runs second, $10.60 to place. And the number 2 Zulu Alpha, I thought a very, very good ride from Brian Hernandez Jr. Be aggressive. Go forward. Runs third, $25.20 to show. The $1 exacta comes back $42. The 50-cent trifecta comes back $480 even. And the 10-cent superfecta, 1428, comes back $453.82. Synchrony is 5 years old. He is owned by Pin Oak Stable. He was bred by Pin Oak Stud LLC in Kentucky, trained by Mike Stidham. He's 5 of 12 lifetime, over $438,000 in career earnings. Beautiful ride from Joe Bravo. Bravo has just taken his riding to the next level down there at the Fairgrounds. I don't think there's any question the best business decision of this entire winter, coast to coast, was Joe Bravo and company moving the tack down to Louisiana. He has had a dominant meeting. He's been tremendous, and he's riding in just phenomenal form. Not that he hadn't been in years prior all around, but this was a really, really heady ride. Saved the ground, got this horse into the run early. And he spoke to Joe Christofek after the race, and Joe had laid out the fact, Christofek anyway, that it seemed like the turf course had been favoring speed in the days leading up to the Muniz Handicap and the Muniz Memorial on Saturday afternoon. Joe Bravo agreed. He said that was part of it. He got the horse into the run early. The fact that he had some gears with this horse, I think that's going to go a long way. Synchrony is a fascinating runner, a 101 Beyer speed figure and a 126 time form U.S. rating. He came home in 12 seconds flat. Again, when you consider how close he was to the pace, coming home in 12, that's not a bad situation. I think that's a very, very good, positive move here for this horse. And you also know that he can win from coming from out of the clouds, as he did 2 starts back. I think Synchrony is a serious, serious racehorse for Mike Stidham, and there's a lot to like here. The pedigree, he's by Tappet out of a Forest Wildcat mare named Brownie Points. I don't have any knocks against Synchrony. I think he's very, very talented. It sounds like if all goes as planned, the logical next step is the Turf Classic on the Derby undercard, a grade 1 at Churchill Downs at 1 1/8, and there's no reason not to run this horse there. Now, if they chose to go to a different position with him, so be it, but that just seems like a very logical step for this horse. He's in raging form. Again, that 101 Beyer, that makes him squarely one of the horses to beat in that race, no matter who shows up. Arklow, nice to see him finally take that next step forward from a speed figure standpoint. 97 Beyer, 124 time form U.S. rating. Zulu Alpha, I had always had high hopes for him when he got here to the United States, thinking that he was going to be something because he looked so good in his first couple starts at Indiana Grand, and he just never got any better. I wanted Brian Hernandez to be aggressive with him in this race. We talked about it in the stakes preview simply because it didn't look like there was any speed signed on, and he had shown in the ability in the past anyway to be a little bit more forward. They rode him aggressively. He sticks around at 91-1, runs a big, big race, a 96 Beyer. Mr. Misunderstood, he's a nice horse. I think this is probably what he is. He's probably a low to mid 90, and there are certain instances, certain spots that he can win in. I'm not sure that he's truly a grade 2 or a grade 1 animal. I think he's probably going to make his hay in those grade 3 ranks. Ring weekend, anything you get from him is gravy at this point in his career, simply because he's had a number of physical issues. Distance-wise, I don't know what his best game is right now, but I do know he likes the turf course at Pimlico, and I wonder if all of a sudden the Dixie becomes the goal for a horse like this if he stays sound and healthy and ready to go. Luke Cullen is the one that I think you may want to just kind of file away because he bobbled badly. He took a ton of money. He was the second or third choice in here, co-third choice at 7-2. He bobbled pretty badly at the beginning of the race. That put him behind the 8 ball to begin with. If you believe that this turf course, again, is difficult to make ground up on recently, he was essentially coming from last. One of the few horses that actually made up any sort of ground. A little bit goofy with the lead changes coming down the lane. He popped to his left lead at about the 8th pole, and then just short of the wire, he popped back to his right lead. But I have to be honest with you. To me, this is a horse now that run in the non-winners of 2 other than 2 starts back at Gulfstream was visually very, very strong. This race is better, I think, than it looks on paper, and now he's the kind of horse that could slip through the cracks. This is the definition, to me anyway, of a horse that, I'm not going to call it a trip, but the race was better than it's going to look on paper, and all of a sudden his odds are going to go up from there, probably more so than they should. Is he a grade 1 horse? I'm not sure, but I wouldn't fault him if they took a shot in the grade 1, the Turf Classic. Kieran McLaughlin before the race had said, we'll find out. This race will dictate whether we go to Churchill for the grade 1 or we go to Belmont. They're going to run a graded stakes race on the same day. Put Luke Cullen in your horse watch mail, because I think there's a scenario where he's going to pop at a decent number in his next start or two, because this race, I don't think this is indicative of what he is, and I think it's a lot better than it looks on paper. Having said that, no one was going to beat Synchrony on this day. He's shown some versatility. Mike Stidham's done a very, very good job. Joe Bravo, another tremendous ride from him. Synchrony's going to be a horse to keep on your radar going forward, whether it's the Turf Classic on Derby Day or maybe even down the road. You think of a race like the Arlington Million at 1 1/4. Synchrony's got some races with his name on it. 101 Beyer, 126 time form U.S. rating. The New Orleans Handicap was run for older horses earlier on the card at the fairgrounds on Saturday afternoon. Here was the field. It was a short field. Only 5 decided to go. You had a scratch in there at one point of Leo Frick that made this a pretty straightforward race. It seemed like there were 2 horses in here, the Player and Good Samaritan. The Player ultimately went off favored at odds of 4-5. Good Samaritan 6-5 second choice, and you can see by the results Good Samaritan ended up being victorious but it was not without some issues in this race. We'll dive into the situation with the player momentarily, but Good Samaritan wins, pays $4.60. Hollywood Handsome runs second, $7.40 to place, and Scuba runs third, $2.80 to show. The $1 exacta pays $18.50. The 50-cent trifecta, $28.05, and the 10-cent superfecta, $5.234, $10.47. Good Samaritan is a 4-year-old, a newly turned 4-year-old for Bill Mott. He is trained by Mott. You can see the owners there: Windstar Farm, China Horse Club, SF Racing LLC, and Head of Plains Partners, bred by Windstar Farm LLC in Kentucky. He's 4 of 11 lifetime. He's over $1.1 million, nearly at $1.2 million in career earnings, ridden to victory by Joel Rosario, and you can see the pedigree at the bottom of the page. He's by Harlan's Holiday out of a pulpit mare named Pull Dancer. Good Samaritan. Before we get to Good Samaritan, let's start off with the player. Unfortunately, he broke down turning for home. You could see Calvin Burrell pull him up as quickly as possible. This is being recorded on Monday. The latest update that we got as far as internally is concerned, and I believe there will be a story at some point, whether it's on live.drf.com or on drf.com itself, that the player was undergoing surgery, hopefully to save his life. I would imagine if that goes well, I'm not even going to go that far. I don't know. I'm not going to speculate on things I don't know about. Certainly, it's a major issue. It's a major injury, and it's terrible for the connections. This was a horse that seemed to blossom as he continued to get older, and as the blinkers went on, and Buff Bradley had handled him very, very well. You feel terrible whenever this kind of thing happens, and hopefully pulls through this and everything ends up being okay for the player. Thoughts are with the connections involved. As far as the race itself is concerned, Good Samaritan, a 99 Beyer speed figure, a 119 time form U.S. rating. He got his final eighth of a mile in 12-3. This was a race that, again, you had 3 horses go at it early, but it's not as though the pace was fast. They went 23-4 for the opening quarter, 48 for a half. So the player, Good Samaritan, who was 100 out of it early beneath Joel Rosario, there was no real worry. There was no real concern about how far back they got. This horse came with a serious late bid. I suppose you can look at it and say, what happens when he gets some pace to run at, more so than he got in this race? Is he going to be even more devastating and more impressive with that finish? I kind of look at it and say, this is what he is. He's going to come with a nice bid at the end on dirt. More often than not, that's going to compromise him, though. On dirt, I would still love to see him go back to the turf. Now, it sounds like they want to get, the connections want grade 1, particularly and preferably on dirt for this horse. The problem is it's a little bit sparse as far as grade 1s for older horses over the next couple months. You're probably waiting for the Met Mile. If you don't want to go the one-turn mile, you're waiting for the Stephen Foster. So we're talking about into June at that point. You got a horse that you just brought back off of a long layoff. I can't imagine you want to put him away for these next few months. I don't know what they're going to do. I would run him in the Turf Classic on the undercard on Derby Day at Churchill Downs. 1 1/8. The distance isn't a problem for him. He has that potent late kick. Even if for nothing else, it's just as a tightener to keep him good to go. And it would space things really, really well. You've got 5 weeks to that race, and then you've got 6 weeks to the Met Mile if you chose to run him there. Good Samaritan's a very, very talented horse. Again, nobody's going to dispute that. But there's a part of me that, boy, he's always going to be up against it on dirt. And he just feels like, to me anyway, that turf is really where he would excel, especially as he continues to get older and he matures more. He can do either one very, very well. No question about it. The rest of the field, Hollywood Handsome, a nice effort from him. Scuba, he's lost a little bit on the fastball, but I think he just needs to stretch out in distance to very, very long ones. Possibly a race like the Brooklyn at 1.5 miles. But Good Samaritan ultimately gets the job done in the New Orleans Handicap. A 99 Beyer, 119 time form U.S. rating. Shift the attention to the West Coast. Santa Anita on Saturday. 2 graded stakes. Let's start off with the Marathon on Turf, 1.5 miles. The San Luis Rey. You had 2 horses that were going to take a world of beating in here. Field of 9 ultimately signed on. It's in the post, and Hayabusa won. They threw it down in their most recent start. And if everything went kind of as planned for most folks when they looked at this race, it really boiled down to a 2-horse race again. I can understand entirely why. They were the fastest horses on paper. They had great form. They've got big turns of foot. They're classy. They check all the boxes. And guess what? It was those 2 who threw it on down the lane. Here's the stretch run with Michael Rona.
At the pair. Soon afterwards, he takes the lead at the top of the stretch. Hayabusa 1 gives him 2.5 lengths. Oscar Dominguez back on the rail, and then comes Responsible for Love, a 16th to go. It's in the post, leads. Hayabusa 1's coming after him. It's in the post, still in front. He's wandering about a little, but it's in the post, has the lead. It's in the post, the grade 2 Guru.
It's in the post. yet again gets the better of Hayabusa 1. He wins the San Luis Rey, pays $4.20 on top. Hayabusa 1, second, $3.40 to place, and Responsible for Love runs third, $5 to show. The $1 exacta, $4.80. The 50-cent trifecta comes back $19.90, and the 10-cent superfecta, $2.978, comes back $17.59. The 6-year-old, It's in the Post. He's in career form. He's earning career best Beyer speed figures in races like this. He earns a 103 Beyer. He is 9 of 33 lifetime, and he's a millionaire now. Over $1 million in career earnings, owned by Red Baron's Barn LLC. Trained by Jeff Mullins, ridden to victory by Tyler Bays. He is a French bred. You see the sire. He is by American Post out of a Mozart mare named Sakara Star. 103 Beyer, 127 time form U.S. rating. Came home just a shade under 24 seconds flat. The internal fractions of this race were color-coded blue, meaning the pace was slow. That's something to keep in the back of your mind going forward. But I love the fact that It's in the Post is adaptable. He can come from the back. He can sit up forward. There's so many things you can do with this horse. He is in career form. He's one of my favorites. I love him. I didn't pick him this day. I tried to beat him with Colonist, but It's in the Post is just such a cool horse. It sounds like Jeff Mullins. They are open to the idea of going back to Keeneland, where he won the Elkhorn last year, and that's another race that they'd be looking at, a mile and a half, $250,000 purse. Why not? He would be the horse to beat in there no matter who shows up. He's just in such good form. You have to feel a little bit for Hayabusa 1. He's run 2 winning races back-to-back, and he just can't quite get to It's in the Post at this point. And it's always one of those things. If you're giving the head start to the horse that you need to beat, you're very unlikely to turn the tables on him. Hayabusa 1, I think, unfortunately fits that bill right now. 126 time form U.S. rating and 101 Beyer speed figure. Came home in 23-4. I don't know what the plans are for this horse just yet. I have a kooky idea. I'd send him to Churchill Downs for the first Saturday in May and run him in that Turf Classic at a mile and an eighth. I think his late kick at a little bit shorter distance is going to be just as potent as it is at these longer ones. And again, just on figs, he fits in right there with a horse like a Synchrony if he were to show up there, or any of the other horses that may be pointing to the Turf Classic. That would be my kind of crazy idea. Don't know that that's what's going to happen with the Team Valor folks. We'll find out, Peter Miller, ultimately where they decide to go with him. But Hayabusa 1, another tremendous effort, just not quite able to get to It's in the Post. The rest of the horses ran really fine. There were no real excuses. It is worth noting this race was run a little bit of a different configuration than normal in Southern California with the long turf races. Because of all the rain that they had recently, it did not start down the hill as most of these races do. It started on the backstretch, on the main sort of turf course. So a little bit of a different configuration. Doesn't matter. You throw anything at It's in the Post, he's going to get the job done for Mullins and Bays. Good ride, good training effort here. 103 Beyer, 127 time form U.S. rating in victory. Earlier on the card, you had the Grade 2 Santa Monica, 7/8 of a mile on the main track. Older fillies and mares, this was the field. You had 5. It was a select group. You had Paradise Woods, who went off as the 4-5 favorite. You had Selcourt, who was just in raging form for John Sadler. And you had Sky Diamonds, who was a graded stakes winner in her own right, trying to get back to her winning ways. This looked like on paper it could be a serious showdown. It turned into a one-horse race, and it started a very, very big day for Tyler Bays. Here's the stretch run from Michael Rona.
Home 2.5 lengths from Paradise Woods. Marley's Freedom on the inside is third. Sky Diamonds is languishing in fourth. Selcourt blazing through the stretch at Santa Anita Park has opened up 5 lengths in the Santa Monica Stakes. It's a brilliant win. Selcourt 6 lengths at the wire from Marley's Freedom. Sky Diamonds has outfinished Paradise.
Selcourt, visually fantastic. Tremendous effort winning the Santa Monica. Pays $7.40 on top. Marley's Freedom, a big effort to run second. $7.60 to place. And the number 4, Sky Diamonds, comes back on Paradise Woods. Runs third, $3.20 to show. The $1 exacta comes back $26.40. And the 50-cent trifecta comes back $27.75. 4-year-old filly is Selcourt. She is really in raging form right now. She's 4 of 6 lifetime. She's never been out of the money. From 6 lifetime starts, over $283,000 in career earnings. She's owned by Medallion Racing, Keith Abrahams, and Sandra Lazaruk. Sorry, apologize if I mispronounced the name. Trained by John Sadler, bred by Keith Abrahams in Kentucky. Tyler Bays, 2 for 2 in stakes races on Saturday afternoon, the winning rider. And you can see the pedigree at the bottom of the page by Tiz Wonderful out of an open forum mare named Azure Spring. You look at this, and as far as the figs are concerned, a 103 buyer, a 125 time form U.S. rating, you don't need me to tell you that those are sparkling. Those are top-notch, grade 1 caliber numbers. I suppose if you want to try to play, poke holes in this, Timeform US has every fraction of this race color-coded blue, and if you just look at it at face value, yeah, you would agree with that. For horses of this caliber, 22-4 for the opening quarter mile, when they can probably go 21-4, 21-3 even, half mile and 45, 3/4 and 8-2. It's not like they really went that fast, and I don't know that it changed the complexion of the race. I don't think anybody was beating Selcourt on this day. But I think suppose you could poke some holes if you were inclined to do so. I'm not. I think this was an awesome effort, and I think this is the kind of mare or filly that could go on to bigger and better things. It sounds like the tentative plan is looking at a race like the Humana Distaff, again, on the Derby undercard at Churchill Downs for John Sadler. He also mentioned the Beholder Mile, and he also even brought up the possibility of running in both of them. This is an interesting spot, because if this filly all of a sudden, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but if she were to win the Humana Distaff at 7/8 of a mile, and then she were to come back and win the Beholder Mile, now you've got a couple of grade 1s. Basically, by the halfway point, you tag on these other 3 stakes wins that she already has to her name in 2018. Now you're starting to wonder, does this become potentially a championship sort of campaign? And I'm not just saying for sprinter. Can you continue? Can you build on that? Can you win races at a mile and 16th? Who knows? Don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. This is a very, very talented filly. John Sadler's done a really, really good job with her. A good ride from Tyler Bays. Keep her out into the middle of the racetrack, where maybe that was the better part of the track during the day on Saturday at Santa Anita. That's up for debate. She came home in 12-2, but she won by 4.5 lengths. Marley's Freedom ran very well. Sky Diamonds, I don't think she ran great, but I guess if you look at the time form numbers, she basically ran a race. She ran a 119, and this is on the heels of running 118s and those high 1-teens last year. So I suppose if you just look at it like that, she just got beat on the square by a better horse. The major story coming out of this outside of Selcourt is Paradise Woods, because this is a terrible, terrible effort from Paradise Woods. A 91 buyer, a 119 time form U.S. rating. She never looked like she was interested. She was sluggish out of the gate. She went up. She was very, very passively ridden, and I suppose I understand you don't want to get into a pitched battle, but at the same time, boy, you got to do a little bit of something. And then when the real running began, she had absolutely nothing. She tried to range up on the far turn, but boy, she got flicked away by Selcourt. And the fact that she couldn't even outfinish Sky Diamonds, that to me is a terrible, terrible sign. Richard Mandela said she didn't run the way we thought she would. I'm not sure what you do with Paradise Woods going forward. I think she's better off going 2 turns. Craig Milkowski brought that up on Twitter on Saturday afternoon. I agree wholeheartedly. I think her speed is better. We hear the air quotes route speed. I think that's probably what her situation is. But at the same time, this was a disaster. This was really not a good effort. And when you see him start to be sluggish out of the gate, I know she's had gait issues in the past, but when you see him start to do that, you wonder if they're losing interest. And if that's the case, look, you can't take anything away from her. She's a multiple grade 1 winner. But boy, this was not a good effort. And you'd have to think long and hard about taking her at a short price in whatever next start she would have, wherever that may be. A horse that you really wouldn't have to think too hard about next time out at a short price is Selcourt, because she is in raging form right now. And I think it's pretty safe to say she is head honcho. She is the queen of that division as far as the female sprinters are concerned. A 103 buyer and a 125 time form U.S. rating. Let's take a look at some 3-year-olds. Gulfstream Park on Saturday afternoon. 6 furlongs, the 64th running. The grade 3 Hutchenson, $100,000 of the purse. These were the 3-year-olds that ran in this race, a field of 6. Your post-time favorite was Impact Player, bet down to 8-5. And yet a couple of horses that vied for that second choice, they ultimately went off co-favored or co-second choices, at 5-2 with Tricks to Do and Montage. There was a horse in here that, if you recall, go back a few weeks on Out of the Gate, I made a horse watch, a horse called Madison's Luna. Pedigree-wise, he fits the bill. He was just very, very green, but he was very impressive winning his career debut. And then they threw him into the deep end of the pool as far as sprinting is concerned early on. Here's Pete Aiello with the stretch run.
The first to turn for home, they lead by 2.5. Second is Tricks to Do. Sutash on the outside is the danger to the leader with 1/8 of a mile now left to go. Madison's Luna has to kick away, and then kick away he does. Madison's Luna making his first start at Gulfstream, his first start against winners, and his first start in a stake, and he passes those tests, no problem, with a no doubt about it win in the Hutchenson. He won.
Madison's Luna, visually phenomenal. I thought this was an awesome effort. He wins the Hutchenson, pays $11 on top. Sutash runs second, $4 to place. The number 4 Tricks to Do runs third, $2.80 to show. The $1 exacta comes back $29.10. 50-cent trifecta comes back $49.35, and the 10-cent superfecta 3642 comes back $33.94. Madison's Luna is 2 for 2. The earnings are quiet at this point in his career. He's $73,180, but he's only gone out twice. He's done nothing wrong. He's owned by Rigney Racing, LLC, trained by Phil Bauer, bred by Stone Street Thoroughbred Holdings, LLC, ridden to victory by Julian Leperoux. The pedigree is the important and the exciting part of this entire thing. He is by Tappet, and he's out of a French deputy mare named Scarlet Tango, who has also dropped Grade 1 winner Visionaire and has dropped Grade 1 winner Terrace Tango. And now you have this horse, Grade 3 winner, Madison's Luna. It also happens to be a half to a horse called Scarlet Strike, who is a Grade 3 winner. So there is a ton of pedigree here. And the best part is the pedigree would suggest that he can do a little bit of anything. Terrace Tango was a winner, a Grade 1 winner at 9 furlongs. Visionaire was a Grade 1 winner of the King's Bishop. There's a lot to be excited about with a horse like this, because even when you watch him down the lane, he very clearly doesn't know what the heck's going on. You can see him kind of looking around a little bit. He's drifting in and out. He's a typical Tappet. He's a typical sort of immature learning things, but the talent, he just oozes it. The 90 Beyer speed figure is strong. The 118 Timeform US rating is very, very impressive. Worth noting, Gulfstream Park, according to Timeform US, color-coded light blue for the day on the surface, meaning it favored horses coming from slightly off of the pace, and this horse basically pushed it throughout. I thought this was a tremendous effort. I'm excited. I've liked him for some time, and I think there might be something here. Another thing to just put it into perspective, how fast he ran and how well he ran, he came home in 12-4. The horses coming from farther out of it, including Sutash, 13-1. And if you want to really break it down into numbers, 12.90 for the come-home time for Madison's Luna, 13.33 for Sutash. Tricks to Do came home in 13.62. The 4th place finisher, 14.26. And the 5th place finisher, 14.01. I thought this was a monster effort, and I think this is a really, really exciting horse. Phil Bauer said it sounds like they'll be pointing for a race like the Pat Day Mile on the Derby undercard. I love the way that they're handling him. Don't do anything crazy. Let's go bit by bit. We break the maiden now. Okay, an aggressive move to ship him over to Gulfstream and run in a graded stakes race, but we're totally within reason. And then, you know what? Let's not get any kind of crazy ideas. Let's go to the next logical step. Stretch him out a little bit more. A mile, 1 turn, Pat Day Mile. If you win there, now you've got, or you run well. You don't even have to win. But if you run well there, now you have options. You can make decisions. You can go places going forward. Maybe you throw them to the deep end. Maybe you wait and play it a little bit more conservative. Maybe you've got a race like the Easy Goer at Belmont on the Belmont Stakes undercard. I don't know. There are a lot of things, in my opinion, to like about this horse. I'm very, very excited, if you couldn't tell, with Madison's Luna, a 90 Beyer and a 118 Timeform US rating, winning the Hutchenson. But I think we're just scratching the surface. I think bigger and better things to come from this horse. Let's shift to Sunday, another Kentucky Derby prep out at Sunland Park. This is the field for the $800,000 Sunland Park Derby. Big field of 12 signed on in here. Lukewarm favoritism ultimately landed on Runaway Ghost at 7-2, nearly 4-1. This is a horse coming out of the local prep, the Mind That Bird Derby. A horse that ran second in that race behind Reride, who we will see coming up this coming Saturday in the UAE Derby over at Meydan in Dubai. Runaway Ghost makes a lot of sense in here, but at the same time, there were major concerns about the pace scenario. It looked like it was going to be very, very spirited. From a distance standpoint, would 9 furlongs really be to his liking? And you had some other interesting runners in here, particularly shipping in from out of town, whether it was Peace, or it was Choo Choo, or it was Seven Trumpets, or it was New York Central, or Hollywood Star. You name it, there were a number of ways to go in this race. But really, when push comes to shove, this turned into a one-horse race, and it was a pretty impressive effort. Here's Robert Geller with the call.
Dream, baby, Dream running on with Seven Trumpets. All out Blitzer, New York Central are tired. Runaway Ghost well ahead. 4 in front. Down the outside. Dream, baby, Dream is picking away. Runaway Ghost well ahead. Dream Baby Dream, the only danger. But what a local support has come to fruition. What a win. Runaway Ghost has done it.
Runaway Ghost gets the job done. Flatters that Mind That Bird Derby form. We will talk about that more momentarily. Pays $9.80 on top, winning the Grade 3 Sunland Derby. The number 10 horse, Dream Baby Dream, runs second. Big price and a big place payoff anyway. $15.20 to place. And the number 5 Piece, $3.60 to show. The $1 Exacta at $11.10 comes back 76 even. The $1 Trifecta comes back $384.50, and the $1 Superfecta $3,600 with some extra change in there, $31.60 to be exact. This is an interesting runner here, 3-year-old Runaway Ghost. He's 4 of 7 lifetime, 6 of 7 in the Exacta, over $563,000 in career earnings. Owned and bred by Joe Peacock out of Kentucky, trained by Todd W. Fincher, ridden to victory by Tracy J. Hebert. You look at the pedigree, Ghost Zapper out of a Desert Gold mare named Rose's Desert. 85 Beyer, 116 time form U.S. rating. Couple things to break down here for this horse. The internal splits of this race, very, very fast, and you look and see time form U.S. has accordingly or appropriately coded them red, meaning that things were fast. They picked it up. You look at those internal numbers, 45 and 4, 110 and 1, and even at the mile, 36 and 1, considering how fast they went, that's a reasonable number. I think there is an outside reason to believe that the Beyer is a little light. You go through and take a look and see what some of these horses were doing in some of their prior races, and Peace is not a good example, considering, as I look over here at the other monitor, Peace, that most recent run, I didn't think was legitimately a 90. He is what he is. He's a mid-70 or a high 70 kind of horse. If you think he regressed even, let's say, 10 points from a 90 to an 80, I have a hard time just immediately looking at it saying that possibly Runaway Ghost could not have run faster than the 85 that he was assigned or he was given. I think this number could be closer to 90. I think it may be 5 points to the difference. Because 7 Trumpets, it would make sense that he could run into that 77 range. It would make sense that Dark Vader could run into something like a 75, and even Choo Choo. If you tack 5 onto his, that puts him into the low to mid 70s, which is where he had been running. So I don't think a 5-point bump, as far as a number is concerned, is an outrageous thought. And if that's the case, now all of a sudden, Runaway Ghost, he doesn't seem like a likely winner for a Kentucky Derby, but look, I'm not going to sit here and knock him. I'm a little bit concerned about the additional distance. I was concerned about 9 furlongs for this race. That 10th furlong, that could be asking a ton, but this horse was wider than wide throughout. He was 4-5 path throughout the entire run. I thought it was a really, really good effort from him. He came home in 12 and 4. The runner-up, Dream Baby Dream, came home in 12 and 3. Everyone else came home north of 12 and 4. So I really have no knocks about this effort. I thought it was very, very good. If you want to say that this was a poor or a weak edition of this race, I'm not going to argue with you, but at the same time, don't take anything away from a horse that all he does is go out and run good races. And this leads me in kind of an odd way, circles to the UAE Derby. Mendelssohn runs in there for Aidan O'Brien trying dirt for the first time. He is supposed to be able to handle the dirt. He's a half to beholder. He's by Scat Daddy. You know the whole situation with Mendelssohn. Re-ride, I thought it was bizarre that they were shipping him over there when he could have run at home here, or not necessarily at home, but over a racetrack that you knew that he could handle for $800,000 and essentially a win and you're into the Kentucky Derby. I thought it was a little bit odd that they would ship him all the way over to Dubai. But Steve Asmussen made mention, he goes, this horse handled the ship very well. He continues to mature. If you want to just, again, things happen, but if you want to just use this race as sort of a barometer going forward with Re-Ride coming up on Saturday afternoon or Saturday morning, depending on where you are watching, I don't think it's crazy to think that Re-Ride all of a sudden, and the buyers are not assigned to the races over at Meydan, but if you think he gets up into a mid-90 number, I'm not convinced that Mendelssohn can run a mid-90 in his first try on dirt. Maybe he can. It sounds like everybody's just kind of handing the race to him. Don't discount Re-Ride. And all this means right here is that Runaway Ghost flatters Re-Ride. But another story for another day. We'll recap all that on the next edition of the recap show here. But take nothing away from the connections here. They should be excited. I would imagine they're going to be running the first Saturday in May with this horse. He's done little wrong. Runaway Ghost is an honest horse, a cool horse, nice, easy to root for. 85 Beyer speed figure, 116 time form U.S. rating, winning the Sunland Derby, a Grade 3 event, $800,000. is the purse. There were a couple other races that we need to go over briefly, and we'll throw those in for this week's montage. You'll get another race from Sunland Park. You'll get a race from Aqueduct. You'll get a race from Santa Anita, and you'll also get the return of the runner-up in the Breeders' Cup Sprint last year from a stakes race at Tampa Bay Downs in Imperial Hint. Let's go to this week's stakes montage.
Blamed by almost a half to Cram, who's running a mighty race. They're well ahead. 5 to charge back, and it's Blamed getting away. 2 in front, Cram in second, and now we see how good Blamed is. She is putting a mark on this race with a big margin. Blamed just cantering. Could have gone round again. Blamed heading to bigger and better, wins the Sunland Park Oaks by 5.5.
Down towards the inside, and Strategic Dreams in fourth. The half was running 47-1. Legendary is the leader with an eighth of a mile to the finish. It's Legendary kicking clear here, in front by 4. Then Strategic Dreams. On the outside is Shamrock Rose and Gibby. But it's all a Legendary to win the Cicada. Shamrock Rose was second, close for third.
On Alfie and Ancient Secret on the inside. Belvoir Bay at the 3/16 goes to the lead. Kicks a length and a half clear of Kanaya. 2 lengths Algorithmic. And then Blame It on Alfie finishing on. But Belvoir Bay is clear. Belvoir Bay from Kanaya, who battles on gamely. Ancient Secret's beginning to flash through near the inside. Belvoir Bay needs the wire. Blame It on Alfie dived.
Handled by Castellano is still well clear. Down along the inner rail, Mo Cash is coming on to be second. DeLand on the outside third. But down to the wire, it was a glorified workout for the outstanding sprinter, Imperial Hint. Reeled in and was never asked for a run at any point in the race by 5.
The figure may not have been fast for Imperial Hint, but it's good to see him back and ready to go. Sounds like the Churchill Downs Stakes on the Kentucky Derby undercard may be the spot that we see him next, and it looks like it could be on to bigger and better things following that. Let's dive in, as we always do here on the recap edition of the Matt Bernier Show. We'll dive into the weekend's best as far as buyer speed figures are concerned. We'll see if any of these races that we went over, if any of those winning performances end up here. Again, this is strictly from a buyer's standpoint. Doesn't matter gender, doesn't matter surface, doesn't matter distance. We've got it all covered for you here. So let's dive into it. The 3-year-old males, we have co-highest buyers in this race coming out of the Louisiana Derby. The winner, Noble Indy, the runner-up, Lone Sailor. They both earned 95s. 3-year-old females on dirt. Mia Mischief in the Purple Martin down at Oaklawn Park, a 93 buyer. 3-year-old males on turf, another tie. He's bankable. And March to the Arch both earned 85 buyer speed figures in the sophomore turf at Tampa Bay Downs. 3-year-old fillies on turf. Oldwood Lane, 76 buyer and a maiden special weight affair at Gulfstream Park. As far as the older horses are concerned, Good Samaritan, older male, 99 buyer winning the New Orleans Handicap. We touched on that earlier on in one of those recaps. Older female, we also touched on this one, may have been the performance of the weekend. Selcourt winning the Santa Monica, a 103 buyer speed figure. Older male on turf, it's in the Post, a 103 buyer winning the San Luis Rey at Santa Anita. And older females on turf, Sully's Dream winning the New Orleans Ladies with a 95 buyer speed figure. There you have it. Those were the best performances of this past weekend from a buyer speed figure standpoint here on the Matt Bernier Show. Before we wrap things up, let's take a look and get you ready to take a look what's ahead for this upcoming week here on DRF TV. You can find all of this and then some on video.drf.com, as well as the Daily Racing Forms YouTube channel. Please hit that subscribe button. You'll get all the latest stuff, and it'll just pop up there on your homepage on YouTube. You can see it's a full week. It's a big week. We're leading into Florida Derby Saturday, as well as the Dubai World Cup. That entire Dubai World Cup Carnival, that card is always fun over at Meydan. You get up early on Saturday, you dive into some races, and it leads into a nice card down at Gulfstream Park. You'll also have the mandatory payout, as long as, well, it's going to be a mandatory payout no matter what, but it could be a giant payout as long as it does not get hit in those 2 days prior, Thursday and Friday at Gulfstream. You'll have the Rainbow Six paid out in full, and it could be some astronomical number, so you'll want to take a look at that. We'll have DRF Bet spot plays. You'll have formulator angles. You'll have DRF Bets races of the day all throughout the week. You've got Derby Watch, because we're into nitty-gritty right now. Watchmaker Improvement, they'll have all that up there for you. We'll also have, you name it, out of the gate, DRF Players Podcast, Oaks Countdown, Derby Watch, you name it. It's everywhere. The DRF Pedigree Report, the Breeding Report, you name it, it's out there. Head over to video.drf.com and the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. On Friday, we'll be back with a preview edition of the Matt Bernier Show, getting you ready for all the action coming up on Saturday. all the focus, most of the focus anyway, is going to be the Florida Derby. We'll briefly touch on some of the races over in Dubai, but most of the focus will be on that Grade 1 Florida Derby, and we'll find out who comes out of that race. Gulfstream has been very, very productive recently. 3 of the past 5 Kentucky Derby winners were victorious in the Florida Derby. We'll find out if that streak continues and goes to 4 for 6. If you've been watching this live, live.drf.com, livestream.com, the social media pages for the Racing Form. That would be at DRF Inside Post on Twitter or the Daily Racing Form's Facebook page. Thank you for doing so. If you check it out, podcast version, most of you do. YouTube, iTunes, video.drf.com, SoundCloud, probably just better off going over to iTunes if you're going to do that. Or, again, YouTube is where a lot of people go, as well as some of the other possibilities, video.drf.com. So, until we talk again on Friday when we go over those sort of things, again, check out the YouTube channel for the Racing Form. Check out video.drf.com for all the latest stuff. Best of luck, however you're playing, whatever you're playing, wherever you're playing. This has been the recap edition of the Matt Bernier Show.